Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. It's Thursday the 22nd of May. This is the news. It's a big day, a big morning obviously. I don't know how everyone else is feeling, but I feel absolutely horrendous this morning. I woke up about 6 times throughout the night thinking about the Europa League Final. Just an utter shambles of a time for Manchester United at the moment, losing to Tottenham in the final. We're going to get into the fallout of that game, a little bit of the it says it on the thumbnail, a bit of the meltdown that we've seen from United's manager, from some of United's players, some of the quotes coming out after the game last night addressing whether they should still be at the club, whether they'll leave, whether they'll walk out, whether United players are good enough, people being aggrieved that they didn't play enough and immediately coming out and saying that to interviews. It was an absolute disaster last night. Getting here, we'll have a bit of a therapy session. We'll go through exactly what's been said and a little bit of a look at what it means for Manchester United going forward. King Ibe says, morning boys. Yeah, morning everyone. Phobos, Taco Man, Dark Times. Yeah, it absolutely is. We've got loads to get through. Let's start with the manager. We'll get to Garnacho and Bruno and some other stuff in a minute. But let's start with the manager, Ruben Amorim. He was speaking after the game and obviously speaking about his disappointment, talking about what went wrong during the game. But the quote that sort of stood out, that's kind of done the rounds and I think sort of shocked people more than any other, is this one. He says, I have nothing to show the fans. So in this moment, it is a little bit of faith. When he says, I have nothing to show the fans, that was in reference to showing us something that makes us believe that he can turn it around. And he said, I have nothing to show the fans. So in this moment, if there's a little bit of faith, let's see. I'm always open. If the board and fans feel I'm not the right guy, I will go in the next day without any conversation about compensation, but I will not quit. I'm really confident on my job. As you will see, I will not change nothing in the way I do things. I understand that there's going to be those sorts of questions about his future. And I do think it's fair enough to say that we need a little bit of faith, because at the minute, what we've seen is just absolutely abysmal. We've not seen any improvement since Ten Hag left, if we're honest. I think, some standout victories in Europe. I don't think we should gloss over beating Athletic Bilbao 7-1 on aggregate just because the Premier League is particularly strong. You're beating a team that's qualified for the Champions League this season in La Liga. And I think that there's something to be said for that. That isn't an easy thing to do, and we beat them comfortably as well. One of our most comfortable European two-legged victories in a long time against a Champions League quality opposition, as we've proven the fact that they literally have qualified for the Champions League, I think, a week after we beat them. So there have been some good moments, but generally speaking, it's all worse than last year. We are worse in the league. We haven't done any better in any of the cups because we won a cup last season, let's not forget. We are as bad as anyone in the Premier League. I think in the last 19 games, United have won 3 in the Premier League. And 2 against Leicester and 1 against Ipswich? Something like that. Like, the only teams United have beaten in the last few months in the Premier League are relegated teams. Like, that is absolutely unacceptable. But I don't really love this idea of the manager talking about leaving all the time personally. And I understand why he says it. It kind of gets in front of people asking these questions. Look at the way it's built up with Postecoglou over the last 12 months. It's been constantly growing and growing and growing to the point where he's fighting with journalists and bringing up quotes from articles that weren't even anything to do with the press conference. You don't want that to happen either. But at the same time, it does add to this level of uncertainty where, is the manager going to quit at any point? Is the manager going to walk in and say to Jim Ratcliffe and Omar Barada, actually, this probably isn't going to work, is it? Is he encouraging them to sack him? I don't know. I don't know the psychology behind it all. I'm not an expert in interpersonal psychology. I don't know what this means and what it will lead to. But it does feel as though that every part of Manchester United is uncertain at the moment. And that isn't a good feeling at all, is it? Not only is the quality bad, but we don't know what to expect from one game to the next. We don't know what to expect from 1 month to the next with regards to the manager, with regards to our captain, as we'll find out in a few minutes, with regards to our young talent in the likes of Garnacho as well. It just feels as though everything that could be bad at the moment is bad. Jack Mannion says, Paul Jewell and Derby had a better points per game than Amorim despite being the worst Premier League side of all time. I don't blame you for saying that, but that isn't true. The Paul Jewell's entire Premier League career, which included Derby as a small section of it, has a better points to game ratio. Paul Jewell at Derby in that season has a far worse points to game ratio than Ruben Amorim. But the way that quote was tweeted or that stat was tweeted by everyone, made it seem as though Paul Jewell at Derby has a worse Premier League points to game ratio. It's not true. It's Paul Jewell as a manager in total in the Premier League has a worse one, is better than Amorim, which is still horrendous and embarrassing. But Ruben Amorim hasn't got a worse points to game ratio than the 11-point Derby, obviously, because if he did, we would probably be relegated right now. I think we only had about 17 points when Amorim took over. So, yeah, just so you know, I don't blame you there, because that literally was tweeted as though Paul Jewell at Derby got more points than this. Akash K says, Joe, you nailed your prediction. I blame you for this. Yeah, unfortunately, I saw this coming. I think we could all see a world where United would lose. It was when people thought United cannot lose to Tottenham. United won't lose to Tottenham. That's what I thought. Why can't we? We've already lost to them 3 times this season. I always thought this was a possibility. And I think for people who didn't see it, who are now coming to terms with it, this must be even more difficult this morning, because what you have to realign your whole worldview around the fact that United have just lost a game that a lot of people thought was unlosable to Tottenham in a European final. I want to move on to Garnacho, and then we'll come back to Amorim a little bit in his response. Garnacho did an interview with ESPN. I believe it was it in Spanish? Yeah. It was in Spanish originally, so it's been translated, talking about his time during the final and his time this season. He said, until the final I played every round helping the team. Then the final arrives and I play 20 minutes. I don't know. The final, the season, the whole situation of the club, I will try to enjoy the summer, and then we will see what happens. I think he also said before that about how bad we'd been in the league. We didn't beat anyone in the league, which, as I mentioned before, we didn't really beat anyone of note all season, did we? We didn't beat Liverpool. We beat City, I guess. We didn't beat Arsenal. We didn't beat Chelsea. Obviously we didn't beat Tottenham. It was a disastrous season. But I don't think this is necessary from Garnacho personally. Like, the fact that he's basically saying, despite the fact that, I've played all season, the manager didn't pick me. Well, maybe there's a reason he didn't pick you. Garnacho, for me, hasn't improved at all this season. And I'm not ruling him out as a player. And I think he's young enough that he will still improve. But the player we saw last year as a 19-year-old, compared to the player we've seen this year as a 20-year-old, is identical. There hasn't been those steps forward that we would hope. And I think there was a point where Garnacho had scored 1 goal in 25 games this season. And then you're shocked when you don't necessarily start a final. He'd got 1 goal in the Europa League, 4 assists, which is pretty good in 15 games. I'll give him that. In the Premier League, it's 6 goals, 2 assists in 36 games. So a goal or assist basically every 6 games. Which again, all right, but it's not so good that you can't imagine being dropped for Mason Mount or Ahmad, depending on however you want to look at it. It makes sense. He's a young guy who's played too many games and hasn't performed particularly well this season, and he's played 20 minutes of the final. And then he comes out and says about how, until the final played every round, and then the final arrives and only playing 20 minutes. I don't know. The final of the season, I'll try and enjoy the summer, then we'll see what happens. What does that mean as well? What are you hinting at there? Do you mean you're going to leave? Do you mean we're talking about next season? Is it purposefully ambiguous, which I think it is? He's obviously not saying I want a new challenge. He's not saying that. Maybe he's a little bit hurt that United were willing to sell him in the summer and he feels a bit defensive. I don't know. But what I don't remember and what I do know is that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, when he came on in the 81st minute of the 1999 Champions League final, didn't come out with a quote like this afterwards. He got 20 minutes or 10 minutes in that game. And what did he do? He won us the European Cup. He won us a treble. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who, if you look at his goals and assists per minute, per 90 minutes in the Premier League, is one of the best players United have ever had. He's one of the best per 90 minutes players the Premier League has ever seen, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and you can look that up. Didn't come out and complain that he only had 20 minutes, and he had a lot more reason to start that game than Garnacho potentially did. I just think that it's completely the wrong attitude to have. We've had a shit season. He's played almost every game in this shit season, and then he's acting as though he has a divine right to start in a final. I just think that, for me, it's just not a good look at all. It's not a good look at all for him, and I'm not going to rule him off, write him off, and kids make mistakes and all that sort of stuff. I think he's obviously upset, and we all say things, don't we? But I just think, just keep quiet. You don't have to say anything. You certainly don't have to say that. Say, terrible game, awful. I would have loved to have been able to contribute more than I did. And I just want to apologise to the fans and leave. This cryptic, we'll see what happens. And, I played every game before and then now what? I just think it comes across as a little bit mardy and a little bit as though you're above your station, personally. I don't know what other people think. Let me know. Garnacho got as many goals and assists as Cunha. Okay, we should have played Cunha instead, or what? What we're saying. Is that in all competitions? Because in the Premier League, Cunha got 15 goals this season, which is triple what Garnacho got. So I don't know if that's across everything, but that isn't true in the Premier League for sure. His brother being a bit of a twat doesn't help either, says Heaven Soul. Yeah, and again, his brother's, what is he, 16, 17? This is the thing with social media. If Twitter didn't exist or Instagram didn't exist, we would never know what his brother was saying unless he went to a newspaper and spoke to a journalist directly. So I'm not going to blame Garnacho for what his brother says, but it does add to this air around him of like, you know what, I'm too good for this. You see it here again, just to get thrown under the bus. On the pitch 90 minutes ago, when has he been the thrown under the bus? Again, I'm not arguing with a fucking 17-year-old on Twitter. I'm not going to do it. But again, like you said, it adds to this narrative around Garnacho, doesn't it? That he's really hard done by. Mate, you've played 50 games for Man United this season. You've had plenty of chance to show what you're about. 57 games. If the manager doesn't pick you for the final, that is more of a testament to what you haven't done in a Man United shirt than anything else. And like I said, he's 20 years old, so there's more than enough time for him to grow and become the top player that we all want him to be. But if you've played 56 times for a team in one season, and the manager goes, actually, I don't think what you've got is right for this game, you can't say that it's not based on evidence. We've had enough of a sample size this season to see that Garnacho, odds are, probably isn't going to put in a hell of a performance. And maybe he would have done. We'll never know. We can all look back on what's happened now and paint another picture with different players. Ugarte in here, Garnacho in there, Mainu up there, Luke Shaw from the off the bench. All of this stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean it would have been any better. We don't know. We'll never know. And it's just speculation. And that's what happens. When you lose games, everything you did was wrong. Everything Amorim did was wrong. It was all a mistake, start to finish, utter disaster. If you'd have done this, this and this, we'd have definitely won. Well, would it have stopped Brennan Johnson or the ball hitting Luke Shaw's hand and falling to Brennan Johnson a yard out? Would Garnacho have been stood on the left wing have stopped that from happening? I don't know. Let's move on a little bit, because obviously it's not just Garnacho, it's Bruno Fernandes, the captain of the club, our best player by a mile, talking about being willing to leave if... actually, let me clarify that. He didn't say he's willing to leave. He said that he gets it. He understands that sometimes players get sold, and if that happens to him, so be it. I don't think he's willing to leave, and I shouldn't have said that. He says, I've always been honest, if the club thinks it's time to part ways because they want to do some cashing in or whatever, it is what it is. Football sometimes is like that. I've always said, I will be here until the club says to me that it's time to go. I'm eager to do more, to be able to bring the club to the great days. The day that the club thinks I'm too much or it's time to part ways, football is like this. You never know. But I've always said, and I keep my word in the same way. I think the club need to come out and do two things. They need to back the manager and they need to back Bruno Fernandes. They need some sort of a rudder in this ocean at the moment, because at the moment we wake up this morning and it is just chaos. You've got Garnacho and his brother saying shit, and again, nothing too egregious, let's be honest, but you've got Amorim talking about walking in and leaving if the owners don't want him. You've got Luke Shaw talking about every Man United player has to ask if they're good enough to be here, and you've got your captain saying, you know what, the club might sell me, and if they do, so be it. The owners need to come out. They need to make it clear that this manager isn't going anywhere, this captain isn't going anywhere, and here's what the plan is for the summer. Regardless of that result last night, we have a plan. We know how to get this club back to where it was. This is a team that finished 16th or potentially 17th in the Premier League. We knew it wasn't going to be a quick fix. Champions League wouldn't have saved Manchester United next season, and we are going to do this, this and this to carry on with this journey that we've embarked on already under Ruben Amorim. They need to do that this week, because otherwise it's going to be an absolutely awful few months. And if we have a shaky transfer window or we don't get the players in that we want, 5 games into next season after spending, let's say, 100 odd million quid, 150 million quid, if the manager's on the ropes and we have to get rid of him, then we're back to square one again. I think we need a real strong approach from Ineos and the board this summer, and ideally this week. We need to know what's going on, and we need to know that despite what all of us as fans think, despite the carnage and the chaos that we see in front of the house at Manchester United, on the pitch and off the pitch as fans, that they have a plan. We need to see that. I think it's like a government. Sometimes the government needs to go, you know what, we know things aren't good at the moment, but trust us, we know what we're doing. We are separated from the emotions and the difficulty that you are going through right now. We can see it for what it is, and here's how we're going to fix it. And then you start seeing the evidence of that off the pitch and then on the pitch, and then you can start to believe it. But at first, we need some sort of, we need a bit of selling on this. I don't want them to be empty words and nothing else. But Ineos need to sell this project to us again. Because right now, it's as low as it's been for Manchester United. This is the worst we've ever been in my life. And I would guess by the average age of our viewers, the worst that many of you or most of you have ever seen it as well. We need some leadership from Manchester United at the minute because it's unthinkably bad. It really is. Luke says the old Division 1 was far more competitive than this Premier League. As such, this is the worst Manchester United team in living memory. Yeah, I think you're probably right. Just to exemplify that, I know it was 20 years earlier, but how it was, 10 years earlier, should I say. Saw Dennis Law talking about this in an interview that was sort of doing the rounds on social media. United finished 19th in the 1963 season. 19th out of 22. Only 2 got relegated, so we were 1 place safe. 2 years later, they won the league. 5 years later, they won the European Cup. The gaps and the difference was so much narrower then. The team that won the league, I think, won it with 61 points in a 22 league season, 22 team competition. Teams took a lot more points off each other than they do now. In any other season, or not any other season, in a lot of other seasons, United would have been relegated this season. It has been completely awful. Steve M says, we're not in the Champions League, but ultimately nothing has changed. We know we need a rebuild. Exactly. And I think that needs reiterating by Ineos and the owners. Ayush Varma says, the mindset of these players like Garnacho and Rashford that needs to be weeded out of the dressing room. The road to improvement isn't linear, says Mike Potter. A switch isn't flipped and then it's all onwards and upwards. There will be plenty more pain along the way. Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're right. I mean, you are right. We need to stick with it. And we need to accept at some point this whole thing of like, is he the right manager? Can Amorim do it? Are his tactics right? We need to get out of our heads that there is only like one manager that can win the Premier League with Man United. And we are digging through this sand. And, some god somewhere has put a diamond in this sand. And if you dig for long enough, you'll find it. There's more than one diamond. There is plenty of managers capable of winning the Premier League with Manchester United, capable of returning us to glory. Like, look at the managers who have won the Premier League. There is a mixture of absolute footballing legends, Jose Mourinho, Carlo Ancelotti, Pep Guardiola, Sir Alex Ferguson. But then there's a Pellegrini and a Mancini and a Claudio Ranieri or two in there as well. Kenny Dalglish isn't one of the greatest managers of all time. He's won the Premier League. Arne Slot, it remains to be seen. But I don't consider him, and I don't think he will prove himself to be one of the great managers of all time. He's won a Premier League. Ruben Amorim is more than good enough to guide a very good team to trophies. We've seen him do that in Portugal. Erik ten Hag guided a very good young team to trophies at Ajax, to a Champions League semi-final, and should have been a final with Ajax. He was good enough. Jose Mourinho was good enough. Louis van Gaal was probably good enough. He'd won the La Liga with Barcelona. Is that not hard? Is that just a walk in the park for managers? The reason why none of them succeeded is because the atmosphere and the players that they were here to manage weren't good enough. So let's build up those two things before we start judging the manager. What if he's out of his depth? I don't think he is. And maybe the reason if he is out of his depth, it's because the depth at Manchester United is so deep that anyone would be out of their depth. That's what I'm trying to say. We brought in Jose Mourinho. We brought in Louis van Gaal, Erik ten Hag. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was a different matter. He hadn't had that same experience. But they were good enough. They were top managers, capable of winning things. We need to change the other stuff at Manchester United before we start judging the manager. And for me, I'm not going to be calling for the manager's head until I think that the team, that the ownership, that the atmosphere at Manchester United is a suitable crucible for a manager to win things. And if it isn't, why are we expecting them to do so? Jack McKenzie says, I don't think there's any manager who could gather success under this ownership with this group of players. Yukon Farkov, lovely, says Jose had lost it at Chelsea. He'd won the Premier League with Chelsea. I understand he'd fallen out with the ownership the year after. He literally won the Premier League 2 years before he got to Man United. Come on. Did he just forget everything he did? Did he lose all of his notes? Did he put his hard drive that told him how to be a great manager? He's accidentally put it in the fucking tip. It's not Bitcoin. It doesn't just go. He's the same bloke that had just won the Premier League, that had just won the Liga, that had just won the treble with Inter. Within 10 years of managing Manchester United, he'd won a treble with Inter Milan. And then all of a sudden he was shit. Come on. It doesn't work like that. United need to build everything around Manchester United and everything around the manager before we can start accurately judging whether Amorim is the right guy, or Ten Hag was, or Jose was, or Van Gaal was. That's my opinion. We're going to be back this afternoon looking at what is next for Ruben Amorim. It's a massive, massive few months for him, a massive few months for Manchester United. What did last night mean for Ruben Amorim's chances to succeed at Manchester United? Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for sticking with it in an awful season, an awful night for Manchester United last night, losing to Tottenham, and by the sound of it, the players and the manager know it themselves as well. We'll have to see how they react now. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you in a bit.